I'm just going to share this story real quick. And it was kind of in one of those religious type settings. Um, actually, a really good family they bought it from. They did an inspection. They had a meth test, which, by the way, when you're doing an inspection, typically the meth test is typically included in the cost of the inspection. So don't forego that. It's always something that you should probably do, in my opinion. But um, the house came back under the state legal limit for not having to disclose or have the house shut down or put a red sticker on the door and nobody can be in there. But it really brings up a question. And I, as the older brother, wanted to kind of protect her and look at it. And so I talked with the inspector about it. Said to the inspector, so I mean, this is like 0.07 or whatever the case is. And I think 1.1, or I believe is what the state limit is, or 1.0 parts per million or something like that. So I talked to the inspector about it and I was just like, hey, tell me about this. Does that mean someone was cooking meth? Does that mean someone was, on a regular basis doing something? And he said this, no. Matter of fact, it could have been somebody who might have had a friend or something that came over that had smoked at some time that day, or they were even standing at a garage and did something and it was on their shoes and they walked in the house and the particles actually will immediately spread out through the house, go through the ventilation system. So that minute amount that we actually saw could have been literally someone getting in out of a car of somebody who might have done something like that.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean the family was bad. Doesn't mean the people were bad. It just means it is the testing is so finite and so accurate that they can really see if anything has ever happened there.
Yes.
Funny thing is, then he brought up a point. He said, "I'm afraid that if I tested most realtors' car floors, that they would test positive for meth as well." And I was just like, "What?" And he's all, "Yeah, because." Look at it this way. A lot of these realtors are going around showing all these houses. They don't know if there's meth in it or not. They're walking through the house. They might walk on the carpet. They might walk on, downstairs. They might step in a little bit of dust or something like that. They get in their car. They go to the next house. They probably can't even identify which house it was. But if I tested most realtors' cars, they would probably test positive for meth. And that just blew me away.
Yeah, I've never thought of that. That yeah, I'm gonna have to start scrubbing my floorboards.
I'm
Yeah,
scrubbing out my
I never thought
truck
of
on a
that. Yeah,
regular basis.
on those same lines, Craig, I had a nephew that we sold a house to. Very religious kid. I would tell you that he that's not his lifestyle. He had four young kids, and we went to sell his house probably 5 years ago. And the buyer, and when we sold it to him, it had been newly renovated, so he opted not to have that meth test done.
Right.
When we went to sell it, the buyer had a meth test done. It was actually condemned, and
Wow.
he had to have it remediated. And then all the remorse come back to him. He's like, I've raised, and as kids were still younger, I think the oldest one was probably 7 at the time, but his mindset was, my kids have been subject to this now for 5 years,
Yeah.
and that's what really hit home with him is his kids. And so
Well, what's the cost of an inspection that includes the meth test? Isn't it,
I,
375,
yeah,
400, 450
yeah,
bucks?
and I think that's kind of, at the most I would think, I mean,
I mean,
obviously
that's
that's not
kind of
my area
standard.
of
I would
expertise.
think that you'd want to do that specifically in this situation where the remorse and the guilt comes back on him that he didn't have it tested, and 5 years later he's selling it, and the house was enough on it that
Yeah.
the red
Oh,
tag
yeah.
got put on the door. That's,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And he, and like I said,
I mean,
the
that's a
big thing,
lot.
it was huge. And the big thing was he was just his kids, and I said, look, there's nothing we can do about that now. Let's move forward. And ever since that day, I highly, 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 and I've always recommended them, but I almost, I make them sign a waiver if they don't have that done, because I don't
Yeah,
want that ever coming back on me.
that's a good call.